going on, everybody? Welcome back to another very special edition of the Extra Mile on You, Me, and Capri, where today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Death Stranding Director's Cut. My name's Matt. I'll be your host for this episode. I'm joined by the wonderful and amazing Andrew from We the Nerdy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
I'm excited to have once again another Extra Mile with you. We did one for Deathloop just a few weeks ago, and today we're going to take a nice look at Death Stranding Director's Cut. So I'm stoked.
Yes. So am I. As a Kojima fan, as somebody who's gone to the deep dives with Kojima, like playing Boktai and stuff like that, I love to talk about this game.
Yeah, I'm really excited, especially because I have a lot of feelings compared to the original, but we're going to get into that in just a sec. Before we get even deeper, I want to say a big thank you to PlayStation Canada, who sent over the review codes for us to check out the game. So thank you to them for providing us with the review codes. Now, let's talk. So for anybody who's unaware, the original Death Stranding came out a couple of years ago. It's Kojima Productions' first game, especially after everything that happened with Konami. So before we get into the director's cut, I want to ask you, Andrew, have you played the original Death Stranding? And if you have, how much time did you put into it? What were your kind of general feelings about the base version of the game, if you played it?
Yes, I did play the original base version of the game. I definitely enjoyed it. It definitely wasn't a game that I knew what I was going into, because a lot of people said it was like a walking simulator, but there was story to it. And kind of after playing it, I really enjoyed it. The soundtrack to that game was phenomenal. And it's not necessarily a game that you can enjoy maybe in short bursts, but it's definitely a game that when you put effort into it, there's payoff for you as well.
Yeah, I've played the original as well. I only spent about, I would say, 10 to 15 hours with it at max. I was really enjoying it, but I kind of fell off. I think something else came out shortly after, and my attention was shifted away from it, and I never went back. And actually, I wasn't really excited about the director's cut. I was curious, but I have to say that I've come around on the game hard with the director's cut. I'm really enjoying it comparatively. So what I want to say before we get any further is that if you spent some time with Death Stranding OG and it wasn't for you, and again, I don't know what it was for me. I don't know if it was a time and place thing. I don't know if the new enhancements have made it a better experience. I can't really figure out what exactly it is at this point, but I am really enjoying the director's cut. How much time have you spent with the director's cut, roughly, Andrew?
Roughly, I've probably about 4 or 5 hours so far with the director's cut. I also put in about the same amount as you. I put about 15 hours into the original version. Same with it was a busy year when Death Stranding came out, but I definitely tried to sink as much time into it when I could.
Yeah, I've spent about 16 hours with the director's cut so far, and I'm easily much farther compared to where I was with the beginning. And just to preface, I did skip a bunch of the introductory cutscenes with the director's cut this time around, just because I felt like I remembered enough of the original that I skipped a bunch of the cutscenes at the beginning of the game, which I still really appreciate and really enjoyed. But I did do that just to kind of get to the action a little bit quicker. But yeah, I'm about 16 hours in. I'm on episode 6, I want to say. And so, okay, so we've established that. Where I want to start there, Andrew, then, is what are kind of your overall thoughts of the director's cut so far?
It's definitely a more streamlined game, I think. It's especially considering the fact that the original title kind of had it's very Kojima nuanced in that way, where it's a lot of you kind of try to figure stuff out on your own. I think a lot of the director's cut kind of helps people that may not have necessarily wanted to get into the first one, kind of help them get in there a little bit better. And a lot more of the community aspects that were part of the original Death Stranding when it came out are there and a lot more amplified as well, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of what the director's cut does well is kind of streamline the base game and make it more accessible. Now, I think that anybody who's looking to dive into the director's cut, from what I've seen and from what I've experienced so far, because I have played with some of the new content, I don't think any of it is enough unless you're a massive Kojima fan to warrant a double dip, unless you're looking to replay the story. Because that's what I think that a lot of what the director's cut does really well is make the base game, I think, more accessible and more fun. Without kind of taking away what made the original Death Stranding so special and so interesting, because now you have more of you have a support skeleton, you have a bunch of different things that I think make the game just easier to get into, and then on top of that, easier to continue on with, because there are sections where it's just okay, I have quite a distance to go. I know it's going to take me a while to get there, but I think that the director's cut, the additions that it has, just makes it more enjoyable as a whole compared to the base game, just because I think it gives you a little bit more breathing room to decide how you want to handle a situation.
100%, and there's also 100% less Monster Energy drinks when you're resting, which I think was one of the weirdest choices for a game. Although we still have the like the ads for the like the AMC shows and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think it was still odd. I'm like, you took out the one part, but you still have the other portion in there. I'm like, I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of like it's just weird advertising for me.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually pleasantly surprised that the Monster Energy was missing because from what I understand, it disappears in the base game after a while as well. But just kind of having that, I think for me, especially in the base game, the Monster Energy being there kind of broke my immersion, just seeing like a real world thing. And to your point as well, the AMC ads in this, I saw them and I was kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot these were here. But I feel like they've toned them down into the frequency as much as you see them. I think I've only seen the AMC ads a few times. But yeah, the Monster Energy, similarly, every time I saw it, I was kind of like, okay, I'm playing a video game. I'm glad it's gone.
Yeah, because it's like it just breaks out a little bit of immersion because you're supposed to be in this post-apocalyptic world, and you're telling me that of every corporation that survived, Monster Energy drink's the only one that actually made it out alive.
Exactly. I completely agree. Okay, so let's run through some of the biggest changes here. I'm pulling from IGN. I'm just going to be pulling from a list just to kind of keep you informed as to what the changes specifically are. So there is a new mission chain in a ruined factory. I've played, from what I understand, there are 3 missions total. I've played 2 of them. Both of at least the first 2 missions are quite short. I think like in total, I've spent about 20 to maybe 25 minutes max to clear both of them, like cumulatively. Have you played with the Ruin Factory at all yet? Because you can actually unlock it quite early.
Not yet. No, I had to find out where to get the Ruin Factory from my side because I was in like a mission and I haven't seen any of the Ruin Factory stuff yet for myself, at least. So I got to figure out where to actually find that.
Yeah, you can actually find it pretty early on, which is nice. Like they make that content quite accessible. But from what I understand, the final mission doesn't happen until much later on into the story. You can do the first 2 quite quickly, but the third one does take some time to get to. So as of my experience so far, I don't think that the added content in terms of like the story content is enough of a buy-in for somebody who's looking to kind of immerse themselves back in this world. I find it quite short. From my experience and from what I've seen, the third mission is a little bit longer, but not substantial. So I think in terms of story content, you're kind of capped at around an hour to maybe an hour and a half at most in terms of new content. Now, if that's enough for you to justify your buy-in, then sure, you do get some more lore, you do get some more Kojima-esque storytelling. But that just be aware that the Ruin Factory is quite short, seemingly from front to back.
Now, I'm kind of curious with that. Is it because at least from what the trailers perceived, it was more kind of like an homage to Metal Gear Solid. Is that at all what you see in there, or is it kind of different?
So the first 2 missions that I've done so far is essentially like the first mission will take you to the Ruin Factory. You don't go inside. The second mission will take you in a little bit further, and then there's a locked door that you can't get behind. Now, the third mission would kind of, what I'm assuming, be what we saw in the trailers. With that kind of, the factory with the, the box and everything. But the 2 missions leading up to that point, they do kind of say like, oh, you should be sneaky, but there isn't a ton of incentive to do it. The mules, the enemies that are, the enemy faction in that section are around, but like I took them down with the Mazer gun, which is the other addition, one of the other additions to the director's cut, which is basically like a stun gun. And like, so I got to play with that and the weapon is cool. But in terms of like, how far they've gone into as of yet, not counting last mission, it's kind of feels more tacked on than anything else, if that makes sense. Like I understand the homage as a kind of idea, but as of yet, nothing has made me feel like, oh, you know what, this is Metal Gear Solid. You know what I mean? Okay. This feels like it. It's just kind of, yeah, they're encouraging you to be sneaky, but again, the sections are really, really short. So it's not like there isn't like a massive onus for if you get caught, nothing's really going to happen. You're just going to get swarmed by a couple enemies. Like it doesn't really reach the levels at this point as of yet. Granted, the last mission might make me feel differently, but it's so far it's just kind of like it's an indoors area, but it's still Death Stranding. It doesn't really feel too much like a Metal Gear connection as of yet.
That's a bit of a bummer, at least for me, because like how the trailers proceeded, it was like, okay, cool. Like Kojima's kind of winking, nodding more at the Metal Gear Solid elements of his past and being like, oh yeah, we're going to give you Sam Porter Bridges, but it's going to be Sam Snake Bridges. So that's at least from my aspect, a little bit more disappointing.
I agree, and that's why I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of a robust added content in terms of at least story. And
Mhm.
again, again, I haven't played the last mission yet, and I kind of think that that's where everything's building to. But at like this far, the two missions that lead up to that point have not made me feel like, oh, this is cool. This feels like Metal Gear, but Death Stranding kind of thing. The other additions so far, there's another support skeleton, which is kind of a mix of the power and the speed skeletons. There's a mazer gun. There's a stabilizer, which if you look in the trailer, it's kind of like almost like a jetpack. You can jump off and kind of float down to areas a little bit more.
Mhm.
I have spent a bunch of time with the firing range, which I think is actually a great addition, because of how much in the base game. I don't know. I didn't get into a ton of combat in the first 15 hours that I spent with the base game. This time, because of the firing range, I feel like I understand the weapons and the way that the different things function a lot more. So I feel better prepared going up against the BTs, going up against the mules. Have you spent any time in the firing range?
I did, yeah. And I feel the same way because I think when you, especially when you enable or you fight the BTS and the mules, and even like the other like nomads that are kind of walking around in the base game, you kind of were struggling to figure out and get a comprehension of how the combat works. But with the fire range, you kind of already can go in there and get accustomed to it well in advance of kind of having those major encounters.
Yeah, I agree, especially because out in the world, those major encounters can make or break you. And especially given how
Yeah.
far you have to travel, right? It's not a simple level reset and you start from the beginning. Like sometimes you're really sent far away and you have to make a quite a long trek with no way to make it faster. So I actually really, really appreciate the firing range. And for someone who doesn't usually spend a lot of time in other games in this kind of setting, I think given Death Stranding and given how it works, I think this is a really, really awesome addition. Especially because, yeah, you can also do the speed run stuff, and it does benefit you in some ways. But I think even as like a learning experience, I think the firing range is a great addition.
Oh, for sure. And I think anybody that's jumping into Death Stranding for the first time, spend some time in the firing range for sure, just to get accustomed to it. Because if you don't, and like you said, like especially with some of those first missions where you're not as equipped as you are later on, and you die, it becomes an extremely aggravating and frustrating event to kind of have to redo something or have to redo an entire mission because one of the packages that you need to get is damaged beyond repair.
Exactly, and it's just like at least you feel more prepared, which I think is so incredible, which is so incredibly important in Death Stranding. One of the other major additions is the racetrack. So I have so far unlocked it. I haven't spent any time inside it yet. To be honest, this is one of the additions that I felt strangest about. I just don't
Yeah.
really see the massive appeal of this as a racetrack. I'm curious to check out the Roadster, which is one of the new vehicles. But as a whole, this to me feels very like almost going to that monster energy levels of like
Yeah.
immersion breaking. This seems very oddly placed. I don't know what your feelings are about it, Andrew. What do you feel
It
about the
feels,
racetrack?
for me at least, it feels more like it's a tongue-in-cheek addition more so than it being any kind of story driven or anything like that that's really going to be worth my while. At least the driving in the game is adequate. It's not
Yeah.
something that I'm raving and going, I want to drive more in the game, or I wish I could have a racetrack option in the game. Cool for the people that want to have it or kind of see what these things do, but when I unlock it, it's not going to be something that I'm like, oh man, this is like Gran Turismo for me, or like a Forza game where I want to just spend my entire time in there.
And I agree a lot. Like the driving the game, I think adequate. I think you phrased it perfectly because even sometimes when you're really moving on like the highways that you can build, it feels kind of clunky. And there's a couple times where I almost slid right off just because like I took a turn too quickly and there's not really much way to mitigate it. So for me, the racetrack, once I get to it, I'll have updated impressions on the PlayStation Drive. Because like I said, I just unlocked it and I just built it. But for me, I think this is the strangest addition. And I think it's kind of, like you said, I think tongue-in-cheek is the perfect way to phrase it.
Yeah, because it's not like something that you need to get, like you need to learn like the combat style. Like it's a car. R2 makes you go fast. L2 makes you go in reverse or brake or do like the little pop wheelie with the motorcycle. Like there really isn't anything else there that you need to get a fundamental understanding with.
Yeah, exactly. Then they've also added some new structures. They have the jump ramp, excuse me, which I love it. I've built a couple of them, and there's a lot littered around the area from other players building them as well. I think this is a great addition. I don't know if it's entirely useful given the ways that I've seen it built so far. Sometimes it's great because it can help get across a jump, especially in a couple areas where there's just friggin' holes everywhere. But like I think it's also one of those things where it's just I find it hilarious. There's a mission where you're carrying a live person on your back. And I was running and I leaped off the jump track and it was like, did this extreme trick in the air with this person on my back. And I saved right before because I was like, I don't know if they're going to fall off. I don't know if I'm going to fail. What happens here? But no, the game let me jump off, do this extreme flip in the air with this person on my back. Again, it's just one of those things it's just, I don't think intentionally, but it is hilarious for me.
Yeah.
Have you seen the jump tracks at all yet?
I've seen the jump tracks. I actually unlocked that right before I ended up like stopping my session last Friday night. But I've seen the jump tracks. I've kind of played around with them a little bit, and yeah, they're I think they'd be necessary in some of the areas where there's a lot more rocky terrain, and you have to kind of figure out a way to go around. But like you said, like I've been in the same situation where the ones that they're placed are more for just goofing around, more so than any kind of actual benefit for me to play the game or to get around any kind of like BT areas or such.
Yeah, I think they're a funny addition, and like I said, there's a couple of moments where they were incredibly useful, especially because I think near West Knot, there's like a whole crag area just full of cracks and everything, and I've sunk a couple trucks in there more than once. But I think they're a cool addition. Chiral Bridges are another one, which is basically a bridge just smaller. The cargo catapult I literally just unlocked, so I haven't used it yet. But in theory, I think this sounds awesome. I actually really like the idea of this catapult to just load up a bunch of cargo and just blast it and then get to it to kind of help finish thing. Even for me, like I don't know how much I'll use it for my actual cargo because I'm a little bit worried that something might happen to it. But in terms of like launching more equipment, because like I always carry an extra PCCs on me to build batteries because I love driving everywhere, even if it's not entirely useful. But I like the idea of the cargo catapult. What about you?
I'm the same. Yeah, I think the cargo catapult would definitely be beneficial for certain things, like, or if you find like those missing items or stuff like that you want to return, like you can use that for that. But for me, yeah, I'm gonna like the key items, like the quest items, stuff like that, they always stay on me no matter what. Like unless it's something where it's too heavy to carry, and I have like one little like the floating assistant. I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head, but like, that's the only time I'm really going to utilize that kind of catapult.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very curious to actually test it out. There's a ton of new customization options as to, make BB and your equipment different colors. That's cool. Just a little, aesthetics thing. The buddy bot is another big thing, especially because we saw it in the trailers. The buddy bot is a robot that can run alongside you. It has to be in chiral networks. It will not function if the area has not yet been connected to the chiral network. So that's kind of like a huge asterisk on it. So like once you get to an area and unlock it, if you're running more missions inside it, then I've had a lot of use for the buddy bot. It's quite it's quite resilient, and it's pretty good at getting around certain things. I think it's hilarious, especially if you get into a car and start driving. This thing will just run behind you. It doesn't get in the car, which I kind of expected it to. And even riding it, it just kind of, if you know that you're where you're going and there's no danger, you can even just hop on it and have it take you to a delivery option. I think it's a great addition. I think a lot of these kind of quality of life stuff, like the support skeleton, like the mazer gun, like the buddy bot, like the catapult, just makes the game feel more fun. And I feel like it takes itself a little bit less seriously, and I think that it works given the confines of the game. What are your feelings on the buddy bot, Andrew?
Same thing. I feel like that it's a nice little addition to have, especially in some of those situations where if you feel like you're over encumbered and you don't have necessarily anything to offload to, you can kind of put the buddy bot on there. I also do think it's a little odd that you have to be in the chiral network for it to work, especially considering the fact, like, as you're starting out, you don't have a lot of the connections set up, so it's kind of be more of a pain in the butt to get that stuff set up or to get that working for you. But it is definitely nice, like another quality of life improvement for sure, that people that might have struggled in the original game can have that little bit more of an assistance to it.
Yeah, I agree. I like it as an addition. Honestly, one of the biggest things that I like about the PS5 Director's Cut Edition is the DualSense. I think they've done a fantastic job with the DualSense. Feeling the different terrain as you run because of the haptics feels really cool. The what's it called? The speaker being there, there's a lot more interface there. Like you can hear BB a lot clearer. It sounds great, and especially like when I got up to the mountains and going through snow, like it felt like snow. I think what they're doing with the DualSense is incredibly impressive. How are your feelings on what they've done with the DualSense?
100% agree as well. Like even when you're like veering to one side, you have to balance yourself, kind of having that pushback of the triggers to try to balance yourself. That adds that little bit extra difficulty to yourself where because at least before, I could just hold L2 and R2 and just kind of walk around, but having that little bit extra sense of resistance to the controller, and having, like you said, with the BB, kind of talking more, you can kind of hear it a little more crisp. A lot of those features, it's amazing. Like for me, I think the best use of the DualSense so far has been Returnal in terms of the raindrops. But I definitely think Death Stranding is number 2 as of right now for the best use of kind of just like the terrain and just how it makes you, just that level of immersion that you don't expect necessarily from a controller per se. But like when you're walking around and you're on the flat-footed areas, okay. But when you're hitting those rocky terrains and your controller's kind of hitting and kind of punching you a little bit more, it's like you feel it more, and you get that better sense of realization of where you're actually at.
I completely agree. I think that's actually perfectly explained. Like Returnal is easily number 1, but I think Death Stranding is a very good fight for number 2 of how much the DualSense adds to its immersion. In terms of the other things that are available with the Director's Cut, you can replay boss battles, and you can also build mountain roads, which I know wasn't a feature in the original one, and which, as I'm getting closer, as I've gotten into the mountains now, I'm definitely going to be spending some time building out those roads, because I think they're I think they're going to end up being useful. Now, in terms of, is it worth it, Andrew? Because I think that's kind of the big question that we have left. So just so anybody is aware, if you have the standard PS4 version of Death Stranding and you want to upgrade to the Director's Cut, it is $10 US. That's kind of the flat fee. The Director's Cut itself does run for a lower price. It's $49.99 USD, which means it's $59.99 Canadian. The Director's Cut, like I said, is a $10 upgrade if you already have the base game, and you can transfer your save files. So, Andrew, I to kind of round out the discussion, do you think it's worth it? Do you think that $10 is a justifiable buy-in? Do you think what they've added to the game is enough to justify that price?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just looking at it from the visual aspect, you get a game that already looked amazing on the PS4, but when you get that PS5 quality, like it takes your breath away in a lot of ways. So just that $10 alone, just to get that option, along with the extra content, for sure. Because even for myself, when I left off in the game, it was a bit more of a pain to kind of remember where I was, but to kind of go back and have those extra quality of life improvements kind of just helped me out more so than anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the $10 is, I think if you're only upgrading with the only intention of seeing the new story content, I think that's where I would put the asterisk. If you're purely doing it for the story content, if something between 1 to 2 hours of extra story is enough for you to justify that $10, then I think go for it. But if you're someone like me who fell off the original Death Stranding, I think what they do with the quality of life updates, with how much more accessible the game feels, with how much more fun I'm having, I think that $10 immediately becomes justifiable. I just think that I don't know if there's enough of a value proposition for somebody who's already completed the game and wants to go back, unless you're looking to start a new save. Then I say go for it, because again, there's enough that's going on in the game that I think makes it worth it from start to finish. But for somebody who's already completed the game and just looking for a bit of story, or unless the racetrack is enough to kind of get you excited, I think that's the kind of only thing that I'll say. Just look into what the Director's Cut offers a little more deeply, just to understand whether that $10 is justifiable. But if you're new to the game, Director's Cut is 100% way to go. If you fell off the game, I think Director's Cut is a worthy buy-in if you think that there's something there that's going to grab you. I just don't know if there's enough there for someone who's already completed the game. That's what I'd say.
For sure. And I gotta say too, I think the biggest gripe I have is with if you're importing your save from Death Stranding over to the Director's Cut, the biggest pain in the butt is that you have to have no active orders in order to make that transfer. And I think that's a huge annoyance for people that might be like in the middle of grabbing some orders or something like that, and kind of having to either complete or cancel them. So just as a heads up, if you are planning to upgrade and for a fact you have orders set up, cancel those orders or postpone them until you get to a point where you can get that no active orders to go ahead and do the migration with.
Yes, that's 100% perfect. Yeah, because that's actually kind of similarly what happened to me. In a way, for whatever reason, my Death Stranding save file was not in the cloud, and I literally sold my PS4 Pro the day before we got codes for Death Stranding Director's Cut. So even if I wanted to migrate, that wasn't a choice. So just be aware that, yes, Andrew's 100% correct. Make sure you're aware of where you're at in the base game if you're going to be transferring your save file over, but it is possible. So closing thoughts, Andrew, I think the Director's Cut is a worthy addition for anybody who's new to the game, or for somebody like yourself or I who fell off of what the base game was. I think that for anybody who's a massive Kojima fan, I think it's also worth it. But if you're somebody who's already completed the game and you're just going back in for the extra story content, just be aware that if you're okay with that $10 for what is essentially an hour to 2 hours at most, be aware that that's there. Andrew, closing thoughts?
No, I think you said the same thing. For me as a big Kojima fan, I love the game. Is it going to be a game that's going to be for everybody? No, because it's not
Mhm.
necessarily a game that is going to check a lot of boxes for people. But if you want a different experience and you kind of want to experience a game that has a excellent story, a great visuals, but also kind of isn't necessarily always engaging from moment to moment, check it
Mhm.
out, because you won't, especially if you are doing the $10 upgrade only, it's worth it. If you are just kind of jumping into it at first, it might be worth just checking out Death Stranding on its own. But either way, it's an enjoyable game. It's a fun game, and it's well worth
Mhm.
your time.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how much it's grabbed me. I think there's something really special here. That kind of feeling of connection, and I think it really does translate really well. So make sure you
Mhm.
guys go check it out. Once again, a massive thank you to PlayStation Canada for hooking us up with the Death Stranding Director's Cut codes. But before we go, Andrew, can you hit me with your plugs? Where can people see more of you?
Absolutely. You can find me over at WeTheNerdy.com, writing articles all the time. Our reviews for Super Monkey Ball Remix are coming out Monday, as well as our Diablo 2 Resurrected review will be coming out later that week. You can also find me over at twitch.com/WeTheNerdy. And basically, if you search for We The Nerdy anywhere like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, we're there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's dope. So as for myself personally, you can find me at Burnout Brighter over on youtube.com/Burnout Brighter or on Twitter at Burnout_Matt. And make sure you're subscribed here to Yumi Capri at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, on Twitter at Yumi Capri's. We have so much cool content. We do the PlayStation Drive every week, the Xbox Drive, the RPG Cave, the Nintendo Drive. There's so much for you to check out. So make sure you're subscribed and following. Go hit those 5-star ratings, do all the cool stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Andrew, thank you for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will see you on the next one. Peace out.
Bye, guys.